This May 31st marks a solemn 103rd anniversary, a haunting reminder of one of the most horrific tragedies in American history. As we revisit the events of 1921 in the prosperous Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, known as Black Wall Street, we're reminded of how Greenwood was destroyed in an 18-hour outbreak of racist violence. At the time, Greenwood was very likely the most prosperous black community in the nation. Tulsa, often referred to as the Black Wall Street, was among America's fastest growing cities, particularly after the 1905 discovery of the Glen Oil Reserve, located 15 miles south of town. This oil field would remain one of the country's most prolific petroleum producers for several years. Tulsa became a boom town almost overnight. Wealthy white Tulsans, flush with cash, created a demand for skilled workers, such as carpenters and bricklayers, as well as domestic workers like cooks and service providers. Black Americans came south over the railroad tracks to fill these jobs and then brought their earnings back home to Greenwood. This led to the emergence of a flourishing Black American professional and entrepreneurial class. Tensions initially flared on May 30th, 1921, when 19-year-old black shoe shiner Dick Rowland was arrested after allegedly explaining that he tripped over the elevator threshold as he tried to enter, accidentally grabbing the white girl who operated the elevator. She screamed, and a clerk nearby heard the scream and came to her aid and called the police, who didn't investigate the incident until the next day. Rowland was accused of assault and arrested. At the time, the Ku Klux Klan was undergoing a resurgence with an estimated 100,000 members across Oklahoma, fueling racial hatred. The police, fearing a lynching, moved Rowland from the regular jail to the top floor of the Tulsa County Courthouse for safekeeping. Greenwood's Black American residents, weary of the ever-present threat of white mob violence and lynchings, took action to try to prevent a worst-case scenario for Rowland. By May 31st, armed black men, many of them World War I veterans, had congregated to stand guard outside the courthouse where Rowland was being detained. When an angry white crowd arrived that evening, vastly outnumbering the black group, the armed guards ultimately retreated to Greenwood. But this was just a precursor to the nightmarish violence to come. Under cover of darkness in the early morning hours of June 1st, vicious white mobs descended on the Greenwood district en masse. Spurred by racist hatred, they indiscriminately shot black residents, burned homes and businesses to the ground, and looted property in a disgraceful rampage. The brutality laid waste to 35 square blocks of what had been a thriving economic hub, a residential area for Tulsa's African American community. When the smoke cleared, the death toll was staggering. Historians estimate as many as 300 black Tulsans, potentially more, were killed during the 18-hour assault. In the aftermath, around 4,000 of Greenwood's black residents were arrested by self-deputized white rioters and the Oklahoma National Guard and forcibly detained in internment camps at the convention hall under martial law, even as their properties were being destroyed by rioters. Oral histories from survivors recount scores of massacre victims were hastily buried in unmarked graves, their fates unknown to those confined in those camps for days. Many Greenwood residents lived on the sites of the internment camp for over a year in squalor conditions while awaiting reconstruction. But the injustice did not end there. In a concerted effort, city officials and the business community conspired to prevent black residents in Greenwood from rebuilding. The then Tulsa director of the Red Cross, Maurice Willows, openly stated the goal was to create, quote, public sentiment which would force the Negroes to rebuild somewhere else outside the city limits. End quote. A real estate body, including KKK and the Knights of Liberty mob, were members who took part in the rampage and were appointed to appraise and undervalue the destroyed properties. They swiftly enacted zone changes that made it prohibitively costly for massacre victims to rebuild their homes and businesses in Greenwood. Despite this being eventually struck down by the Oklahoma Supreme Court after expensive lawsuits by survivors, the delays forced many to live in makeshift tents and shanties amidst the ashes for up to a year. The Red Cross, while providing some relief effort, also facilitated this forced displacement, offering free train tickets for those willing to leave Tulsa behind. Many took this difficult choice, while those who stayed were eager, made to struggle in rebuilding their once thriving community. Mere days after the massacre, on June 3, 1921, the Tulsa World newspaper reported plans to convert Greenwood into an industrial section and relocate the black population elsewhere. Meanwhile, the insurance companies exploited riot exemptions to reject over 1,400 claims filed by victims who lost homes and businesses. This systemic denial of financial restitution left the devastated community with no choice but to exhaust their limited resources in the struggle to rebuild for nothing. Whites and blacks alike had their claim rejected in a campaign of economic erasure. Despite the widespread death and destruction of the thriving Black Wall Street district, not a single white citizen was ever convicted of murder or any other crime related to the Tulsa Race Massacre, although many were arrested and released. And for decades after, the atrocity was actively suppressed, erased from history books and the public consciousness. Over a century ago, an unspeakable tragedy unfolded in the thriving black community of Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre left homes and businesses burned to ashes, lives senselessly lost, and an indelible scar on the nation's consciousness. Yet, in the aftermath, not a single survivor or bereaved family member received any compensation or acknowledgement from the insurance companies, state, or city officials meant to protect them. Their cries for justice went unanswered for decades until 2022, when two of the last known survivors, 109-year-old Viola Fletcher and 108-year-old Lessie Benningfield Randle, brought their case for reparations before state lawmakers with undaunting determination. Though their initial lawsuit was dismissed in 2023, they refused to let this grave injustice be forgotten. On April 2nd, 2024, Fletcher and Randle stood tall before the Oklahoma Supreme Court to appeal the dismissal of their lawsuit against the city of Tulsa. As we await the ruling, their resilience serves as a powerful reminder of the long road towards racial reconciliation. On this solemn 103rd anniversary, let us resolve to shine an unwavering light on the full, brutal truth of the Tulsa Massacre. Let us honor the lives and livelihoods so cruelly robbed by hatred's flame. Let us stand in solidarity with those still seeking long overdue redress and atonement for one of America's darkest chapters.